It was over 10 years ago when a friend and I visited Japan. It was our first time there, so we went with a tour company. However, after the tour ended, we decided to stay an extra night at a hotel in East Ikebukuro. During the tour, the guide would share stories of haunted hotels and other urban myths, as one does over beers or while enjoying a late-night onsen. One of the things he warned us about was to be cautious if we found a room where the head of the bed was positioned next to the window where, if you looked up while lying in bed, you'd see outside. He tried to scare us by saying that in such rooms, ghosts would come through the window at night and drag you out to your death. Back to the hotel in East Ikebukuro. We checked in during the early evening, and the first thing we noticed was how small the room was. The second thing was that they had given us a double bed instead of twin singles. And thirdly, the head of the bed was right next to the window. We rationalized that the room was too small to arrange the bed any other way, and dismissed the tour leader's stories as nonsense. To be honest, we were more annoyed that we had to share a double bed. We decided to let it go since it was just for one night, so we went out for dinner before turning in for the night. That night, I was woken up by a door slamming shut, and I jolted awake. There, sitting at the foot of the bed, was a woman in a blue kimono. She had long hair, and from what I could make out, her kimono had butterflies on it. I freaked out, dove under my pillow, and buried my head. Looking back, that was a useless move if anything bad were to happen. I remember thinking, is this real? How can I check without looking? In my genius, I decided to shuffle my foot down the bed, thinking if I didn't touch anything, it was just my imagination. I didn't think about what I'd do if I did touch something. Little by little, my foot moved down the bed when I noticed that there was definitely a depression at the foot of the bed. Someone or something was there. I quickly pulled my foot back, started to sweat, and began repeatedly saying the Lord's Prayer until I must have fainted or fallen back asleep. I remember waking up at 6 the next morning. My friend was already dressed and packed. I asked him if he saw or heard anything last night, and all he said was, "I don't want to talk about it. Let's check out." When I joined the military, I was stationed in Japan. On my very first night there, I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw a figure crawling on the ceiling. It had a long tongue, and when it noticed me, it laughed and then disappeared. I was so scared I couldn't go back to sleep. Months later, I told my friend's wife about the experience, and she explained that it was a ceiling oni, a spirit. She mentioned there are many such spirits. Using a Japanese keyboard, she searched for an image on Google and showed it to me. I swear it looked exactly like what I had seen. I've never been able to find the exact image again on Google. I'd probably need a Japanese keyboard to do it. Another time in Japan, I was walking home from the train around midnight. I had taken this route many times and never felt scared at night. Japan is very safe and quiet at night, serene and calm, at least around the military base. But on this night, signs and billboards were not where they usually were. They were gone. The buildings looked older or some weren't there at all. Everything seemed different. The streetlights, even though they were right in front of me, appeared distant, as if there was a film over them. I saw people outside doing chores, washing clothes, and cleaning a fish on a wooden block. This was at midnight. Nobody made a sound. By this point, I was practically running, convinced they were not from the world of the living. When I got near the base, the film faded away, and everything returned to normal. It was incredibly scary and left a lasting impact on me. I'll never forget that. I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to ghosts, so I still think there's probably some sort of explanation for this. But it was strange, and I still think about it from time to time. 17 years ago, when I first came to Japan on the JET program, I was sent to a small island. My apartment was quite old and run down, and it was located across the street from an old Buddhist temple with a graveyard. Every now and then, both my lights and my TV would turn on and off in the middle of the night. It usually woke me up, especially the TV, because at the time it was still analog, so it would just be static in the middle of the night. For some reason, the volume would always be up high, even though I never set it that way when I watched TV. I always thought that since the building was old, it was probably an issue with the electrical wiring or something like that. After living there for a few weeks, I befriended the elderly lady who was the mother of the monk running the temple across the street. I could speak a bit of Japanese, and she seemed lonely, so she quickly reached out to me. It was really nice. She would bring me fruits or rice from time to time, and she showed me where the convenience store and grocery store were on the island. She generally looked after me, making sure I was eating properly and taking care of myself. She was a very kind lady. As we got to know each other better, she started telling me that she could see dead people and that there were a lot of ghosts wandering around the temple and the surrounding areas, especially near my apartment building. Honestly, I thought she was probably just imagining things, but then my lights and TV did that thing where they turned on and off at night again, and it really unsettled me. One night, it happened again, and I was so freaked out that I yelled for it to stop, but it continued. So then, I yelled for it to stop in Japanese, and it stopped. That really, really scared me. I still think it was probably a coincidence, and there's likely a rational explanation for it, but I will say I was relieved when my time at Jet was over, and I could leave that apartment. I kept in contact with the elderly lady until she passed away a few years ago. I miss her. When I first moved to the countryside, I attended a local festival and met an eccentric priest. He shared a ghost story about a spurned woman whose vengeful spirit haunts the local river. People kept offering me drinks, and by the time the festival ended, I was completely intoxicated. I tried to bike home but quickly got lost. At first, I enjoyed aimlessly wandering the countryside, but as I sobered up, I began to worry. I had just arrived in Japan and didn't have a phone. The roads were pitch black, illuminated only by the faint moonlight and my bicycle's dim light. Although it was midsummer, a chilly wind swept over the rice fields. I shivered. Eventually, I saw lights in the distance. A pachinko parlor loomed over the rice fields, the only building in sight. With no better plan, I headed toward it. Although the lights were on, the building was closed and empty. A woman stood alone in the deserted parking lot. I asked if she knew the way to my town's train station. She laughed in surprise, saying I was far away, very far away. She started to give me directions, but they were confusing and seemed to contradict each other. The whole time, she had a mysterious smile that I couldn't decipher as friendly or malicious. I got the feeling she was just messing with me. In the end, I had no choice but to simply say thank you and continue riding. Eventually, I came to a river. I thought it might be the haunted one, but I was already pretty far from the temple. In any case, I rode along the river downstream, figuring that it would eventually cross a main road, from which point I could make it home, and indeed it did. Later on, I tried to trace my route on Google Maps but couldn't figure it out. One day, while biking around, I stumbled across what I thought was the pachinko parlor, but it was overgrown and dilapidated, abandoned for years. Maybe the pachinko parlor I saw was an apparition. Maybe the woman I met was a ghost. More likely, I was just a confused, drunk foreigner, and the countryside is full of strange pachinko parlors placed in the middle of rice fields. I used to live in a small apartment on a hill in Kitanakagusuku, Okinawa. At the bottom of the hill and along the road leading up to my apartment were grave sites. The weekend I moved in, I decided to have a housewarming party with my closest friends Orion, Strong Zeros, and Taco Rice. At the time, I didn't drink, so I often facilitated the shenanigans of my drunk friends by willingly driving them anywhere. My friend Takuma had the brilliant idea to go to the Nakagusuku Castle ruins and the old haunted hotel. Why not, right? We piled into my little Subaru Impreza and started driving. It was September in 2011. As we got closer to the ruins, it got freezing cold. It's supposedly 82 degrees outside and nothing should be cold about it, but we were all in the car, shivering. My very well-maintained car started sputtering and died. I started it back up immediately, but everyone thought it was strange. And finally, my friend's watch stopped working. It was a brand new Breitling he had received from his grandfather. We stopped on the side of the road to take in all the strange things that had just happened. Another friend in the car started sobbing out of nowhere. She kept saying that we needed to go home and that they're not happy. She wasn't religious or spiritual or anything of the sort, but she was speaking of spirits warning her. Something was up. I turned around and drove home just as fast as we had left. I wasn't taking any chances. We got to my place and I broke my diet for a glass of whiskey. We all sat around in silence for a bit. There wasn't much joking or discussion about what happened. The mood was almost somber. We drank in this strange, polite mood until everyone fell asleep. The next afternoon, well after everyone left, my friend Takuma came over with his mother to finish helping with the move. She got to the door and freaked out. She left for an hour and came back with salt, incense, sage, a couple of charms, and was chanting around my apartment and sprinkling salt everywhere. She told me not to dispose of the salt for at least 7 days. We never told her about the night before. Okinawa is well known to be haunted. For a long time, I thought it was just a bunch of exaggerated ghost stories. You hear about the suicide cliffs or the ghost GI who asks for a light, but you don't think much about it. This was many years ago, and it still feels fresh. Many years ago, I used to teach English in the evenings in Japan. Many of my classes were held at various temples and shrines, as these spaces were often used for community activities. It was around 11:30 p.m. after my last lesson with a student. Once she left, it was my responsibility to vacuum the room and turn off the lights. That evening, as I entered the room with the vacuum, I noticed several decorated drums and portable shrines I hadn't seen before. They were being stored there in preparation for an upcoming festival. When I opened the door, I saw the items moving slightly, but I assumed it was due to the vibrations from the door and carried on with my tasks. I usually try to avoid thinking about unsettling things and just ignore them if they happen. I turned off all the lights, except for the one near the entrance, before returning the vacuum to the storage room. As I opened the door to the storage room, the large drums began to boom loudly in rhythm, and the portable shrines started making noise as well, with the smaller drums on them adding to the commotion. Overwhelmed by the cacophony, I was too frightened to look. I quickly fled the building and ran to my car, only to remember that I hadn't locked up. Determined not to get in trouble, I called my husband and kept him on speakerphone while I hurried back to the temple. With trembling fingers, I managed to lock the door, all the while still hearing the drums from outside. Fortunately, I managed to get out safely, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was playing tricks on me. Since then, people have asked if I ever saw any ghosts at the temples, as in Japan, it's believed that ghosts come out at temples at night. I never mentioned that incident and simply said no. I'm fairly certain it wasn't an earthquake, as the noise from the drums seemed as if someone was hitting them rather than just rattling. Also, I didn't feel any tremors, and the noise continued longer than a typical earthquake would last. It felt like the commotion was specifically related to me opening the door and entering the room, with the initial rattles serving as a warning and escalating when I returned, urging me to leave. Please drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more horror stories.